Good morning. We are going to begin today with a congregational song, and it is Lean On Me, and this is from the new book, so the one in the binder, and all of the songs in it are placed in it alphabetically, so you'll need to go to the L's. And we have accompanying us today on the piano, the fabulous McKinney. Please rise in body and spirit as you're willing and able to sing Lean On. Welcome to the first existentialist congregation of Atlanta. We are a philosophically based spiritual community based on existentialist feminist principles and dedicated to human liberation. We make our spiritual home in the old stone church which was hand-built by the African American Antioch East Baptist Church. We acknowledge that racial hostility drove those African Americans from the area, and we honor them and the powerful history of this place. We also acknowledge that in the 1800s, the Muscogee Creek people were driven from this land, and we support justice for all indigenous people. Our opening words are actually going to be an opening activity. So I invite you to close your eyes, take a moment to center yourself by intentionally breathing deeply, expanding your lungs, opening in 3 dimensions, forward, backward, side, side, and up, down, as we open up the lungs. And then exhaling. And with the exhale, letting all of the tension, the angst that you might have brought into this space with you, let it dissipate. And with the next inhale, breathing in joy and lightness. And then with the next exhale, sharing that love and joy from your kinesphere out into the rest of the room. And now we can open our eyes up again and look around the space. Do we have anybody here for the first time? Or, yes, would you like to let us know who you are and how you came to be here?
My name is Peter Friend. I moved from Baltimore about 2 weeks ago to be with my granddaughter. So,
Welcome, Peter.
What brought you to First King?
I'm wondering down the road.
How very existential. Encountering us on the journey through life. Well, welcome. Anyone else who either hasn't been here for a while or is new? Well, if you look in our bulletin, the lovely bulletin that our congregation administrator Edith Covington puts together every week, there's a flap called the connection card, and you can fill this out if you're interested in getting to know more about us. We do have a couple of weekly e-blasts that Robert sends out. Just updating folks on news about the congregation and the members and our activities, as well as a monthly newsletter that's assembled by Jan Lister, and it is available in either electronic or print format. But if you sign the connection card, you can avail yourself to those opportunities and get to know us better. All right, do we have any birthdays or anniversaries to celebrate today? Yes, Sanjay.
This week, Bob and I will be celebrating 16 years of marriage.
16 years. Would you like to come forward or just stay where you are? Trey, you want to come stand in for your mom? Happy anniversary.
God, you're almost as tall as you are now. Yeah.
A little,
Hello, happy anniversary.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
To you. Happy anniversary to I'm loving that tune as a cha-cha. Thank you. Exactly. Well, we are now going to move on to our next congregational song. And again, it's from the new book, and it is Take It to the Limit in the T's. Please rise and body your spirit. Rise and body your spirit as you're willing. If anyone has any community announcements that you'd like to share, please write them down and pass them to me before the end of our celebration of life today. I'm just wanting to make sure that I am not seeing Marcia, correct?
Correct.
Marcia's not made herself invisible. Okay. We're going to move on to our time of silence. And so for about the next 5 minutes or so, we will have an opportunity to be in unity and to just be silent with one another. We have candles on either side of the sanctuary if you are so inclined to want to light one. Welcome back. We are going to move on to our next congregational song, which is also in the new book. It's called Instant Karma. So looking under I.
Right.
theme today. What am I up to? Or I forget the theme is. What is, whatever the theme was today. Something about, oh, who am I? What do I want to be? Yeah. So, anyway, I went back in my old book and I realized, like Robert was talking about the 50th anniversary, some of the like, songbooks are many decades old, and you realize that your font has changed. Your handwritten font is still that old, and also your singing range is no longer the same. So, opportunity to kind of update. So, anyways, this is another one of my tunes, one of my songs I felt would be appropriate. Sort of a love letter to one's higher self. You can all think about it that way if you like. I'm not
Today's speaker, Reverend Kim Palmer, is looking forward to being able to enjoy the produce that is coming from her garden, specifically tomatoes and squash. And so she's looking forward to that in the coming month or so. And at this time, we'll welcome Kim to come on up and share your remarks.
So great to be back here with you all and everybody who's watching as well.
Would you take your mask off?
I didn't know if I was allowed. I'd love to. Thank you. When I was a kid, there was a small sewage treatment plant down the road from where I grew up. And when I became a teenager and I was filled with angst, I would ride my bicycle down there and climb over the 8-foot fence and just watch the aerator churn. So one day I was down there and the treatment plant operator drove up. So I knew I could climb back over the fence and run into the woods. He never would catch me. But I was reluctant to do that because I thought he might worry that I had done something to the plant or committed some act of vandalism. I didn't want him to either worry about that or waste time looking for damage. So I just stood up and waited for him to arrive. So he saw me inside, and he looked puzzled, and he unlocked the gate, and he came in, and he came up to me, and he still looked puzzled. And he said, "Are you with the EPA?" I said, "No, I'm only in high school." I was like in 9th grade. "How did you get in?" he said. I said, "I climbed over the fence." I explained that I came to the plant sometimes to watch the aerator, and that I didn't want to just run away because I didn't want him to think that I had done something to the plant. He pondered that for a moment. "Do you want a tour?" he said. So he showed me the settling tank, the big pumps and the motors that ran the aerator, the sand filter beds, and the chlorination station. And he explained what he was doing as he checked the chlorine levels and collected up the strip charts that had recorded the flow. Then he told me he was done and he was going to leave. And there was a little bit of an awkward pause, and he said, "I have to lock the gate. Are you coming out with me, or are you just going to go back over the fence?" I said, "Oh no, I'll come out with you." So when we were outside the enclosure and the gate was locked, I turned to him again, and I said, "If you tell me to never come back here again, I'll never come back." And he thought about that, and he said, "I can't see as how you're doing any harm." So like many adolescents, I had a strong sense of moral absolutism. Now obviously I didn't have a problem with trespassing. Because when I did, I never, got into mischief. I didn't steal anything, I didn't bother or damage anybody's other stuff. I held very strongly to what I thought was right and wrong, and I saw myself as a person of integrity and personal responsibility. So this meant that when the operator arrived, I stayed inside the plant, and I was willing to get caught, I was willing to get in trouble, I was willing to be banned from the premises. I knew who I wanted to be and how I wanted to behave, and I was willing to adhere to that and face the consequences. Now, here I am, many decades later. Who am I now? Am I kind, loving, centered, compassionate? It's easy to be those things with my friends, but what about with others? One unfortunate thing about the news, I'm sure you've heard the adage, is that if it bleeds, it leads. So we get a distorted view of risk and threat and crime. Of course, we still need to keep ourselves safe, to pay attention to those things that give us misgivings, and to keep ourselves out of unnecessary danger. But I don't want to be that person who cowers in my bunker, afraid of every knock on the door that it might be some evildoer bent on doing me harm. One summer, probably 20 years ago, my spouse Marty and I went out to run errands. We noticed that there was a pickup truck with its hood up along the side street, with a trailer behind it full of yard equipment, and a couple of men sitting in the cab. So we went out and we ran our errands and we moved off. And when we came back about 3 hours later, they were still there. The hood was still up. So I knew that they'd been there at least 3 hours, maybe more. And I knew that if I had been sitting in a truck for 3 hours, I would have to pee. So I walked over. It was two Hispanic men. They didn't speak much English, but they spoke enough. When I asked if they needed to use the bathroom, they both nodded vigorously. I led them back to the house and directed them to the facilities. And after they had cycled through, I asked if they were hungry. They nodded again. I fixed them a hearty lunch, and we all sat down to eat. It turns out their truck had broken down, and a third man had taken, on the crew, had taken a part to a repair shop to be fixed. Once he got back with the part, they would be able to fix their truck and go. They seemed grateful for the food and the drink, and after eating, they left to resume the wait in their vehicle. When I told my mother about the incident, she was horrified. "You let strange men in the house? They could have robbed you or killed you." You know, and yes, I suppose they could have. But it seems unlikely that they would sit in a truck in the summer heat with the hood up for half the day, just waiting for some unsuspecting victim to invite them in. It seemed much more likely that they were what they appeared, two hungry and thirsty men sitting in a broken-down work vehicle in a strange neighborhood, hoping their friend got back before their bladders burst. Do I want to be so fearful of everyone that I can't extend a helping hand to a neighbor in need? No, I do not. I would rather be kind. At Emory, we provide our chapel residents with cognitively based compassion training, a contemplative practice designed to cultivate compassion for the self and others. One of the meditation exercises is to call to mind 3 people: someone you're close to, someone neutral, like maybe a bus driver or, say, a guy in a truck broken down in your neighborhood, and then somebody that you find difficult. And then to recognize in each of them the common human traits of just wanting to find happiness and avoid suffering. We practice regarding each of these people with warm-heartedness. The idea is to broaden our sense of compassion beyond our immediate circle to ever wider groups, even enemies. Extending compassion to others. Might that be who we want to be? In 1968, a Russian sub sank in international waters with all hands lost. The U.S. mounted a salvage operation in 1974 in an attempt to retrieve the sub and get a look at Soviet technology. Because this was during the Cold War, they couldn't just, the mission was secret, and it was carried out under a cover story of undersea mining. During retrieval, the claw that they were using malfunctioned and the sub broke, and only the 1/3 of the sub was raised to the surface. And in that compartment, they found 6 bodies. Of course, the U.S. couldn't just return the remains to Russia and admit that we were filching their sub. So the 6 sailors were given a burial at sea with full military honors, and the ceremony was filmed in hopes that it could be shared with the Russians at one, later date. And in fact, it was. The film was given to Boris Yeltsin in the early 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. and the parents were finally able to see their sons buried. This is who I want us to be as a nation. We may have been at war. The Russians may have been the enemy, but those boys still deserve to be buried with respect, and we did that. But we're not always so upstanding. In 2013, two self-radicalized brothers of Chechen Kyrgyzstani descent committed an act of domestic terrorism, setting off 2 pressure cooker bombs near the crowded finish line of the Boston Marathon. Several people were killed, and over 260 were injured, 17 of whom lost limbs. One of the brothers, Tamarin Tsarnaev, was killed during the chase, and the other, Johar, was caught and sentenced to death. Tamarin's body was held in the funeral home outside of Boston for over 3 weeks because no cemetery would agree to bury him. I remember at the time thinking that this kid should still be buried despite the horrible thing he did. I thought it was shameful that no one would take his body. Ultimately, it was a compassionate Christian woman following her understanding of Jesus' instruction to love our enemies, who worked to find a Muslim cemetery in Virginia, where he was finally laid to rest. Of course, we were angry at this guy, angry at all the suffering he had caused. But what should we have done with his body? Throw it in the ocean as chum? Drag it through the city, chained to the back of a truck? Sometimes it feels easy for us to nod and say, that sounds about right. But he is still a human being. Does anybody remember the images from about 30 years ago when the naked body of an American service member was dragged through the streets of Mogadishu by the supporters of Somali warlord Mohammed Adib? It's called desecration of a corpse. It's called that for a reason. Desecration. A word that describes the treatment of something sacred with violent disrespect. Regardless of whether this is your brother or an enemy, a Mother Teresa or a Hitler, this is a human being. Again, I ask, who do we want to be? Do we want to be the person who kicks and spits on a broken body being dragged through the cheering mob? Or do we want to be the person who retains their own humanity by recognizing the humanity of the other? So how do we apply these concepts to our personal lives? For me, I struggle with the current political divisions. Take Trump. I think he's a bully and a user. I don't think he respects people or institutions or the law. I found many of the actions and policies during his presidency abhorrent. Now what? Do I want to be a person who is kind, loving, and compassionate, even to my enemies? Some of you may be familiar with the story of the orphans from Romania adopted by U.S. families from absolutely appalling conditions that came to light in the early 1990s. I see some nods. Children were abandoned by their parents and deemed unsalvageable by the state and received, at best, minimal care with little food in unsanitary conditions and no affection. Many of the children adopted from these orphanages were irreparably damaged, and despite therapy and caring adoptive parents, grew up with attachment disorder and antisocial behaviors. Several have written about their experiences and struggles. Some have found a measure of success in learning what behaviors are expected and mimicking them to stay out of trouble and out of jail. But they remain completely unable to feel empathy or to make an emotional attachment to any other person. The people are damaged, yes. They may even behave cruelly and spread pain wherever they go, breaking the hearts of all who would try to care for them. But we can have compassion for them and their emotionally stunted lives, the psychological damage acquired through no fault of their own. I try to remember these orphans when I think about Trump. What do we make of his steady stream of lies? the wreckage he's caused through his actions, his lifestyle of grift, his delight in cruelty. What damage was inflicted on him to make him this way? Now, this doesn't give him a pass. There still needs to be accountability, but perhaps he is also a victim. Imagine how small and soulless his life is, a product of his environment or perhaps a disordered mind, with his transactional approach to everything and anyone, and his inability to have true connection with any other human being. I feel sorry for him. I might even be able to reach for compassion. But sometimes it's hard. It seems that the world these days is conspiring to keep us from our better selves. It does feel like we're under attack and have enemies all around us. We're in the midst of a highly polarized nation surrounded by leaders steeped in corruption, attacks on our fundamental rights, and poor behavior at every level, from the increasing rudeness of drivers on the roadway to the vitriol spewed by politicians who demonize immigrants, transgender people, Black Lives Matter, and even democracy itself. I struggle against the darkening of my own heart. I find myself wishing not just that people will be brought to justice, but that they will experience the same suffering that they caused others. When someone falls out of favor with Trump or his base for not being extreme enough, and the right-wing machine turns on them, I feel happy that they're getting a taste of their own medicine. When someone who has been a vocal influencer on social media in opposition to masks and vaccines gets COVID and dies, I feel like it serves them right. I'm sometimes full of rage and lust for vengeance. I don't want my enemies disempowered and stopped alone. I want them crushed. But am I no better than Adid's mob in Mogadishu, spitting and kicking and dancing as the corpse goes by? I want to be better than that. I want to be. I do not want to be a person who delights in another's death, who takes joy in another's suffering. How then do I return to who I want to be? Here's what I think we can do. When we feel that clenching of the jaw, that hardness of the heart, we can notice it. Take a deep breath, reflect on our common humanity, and how there is nothing new under the sun. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a poem after hearing about a girl who jumped into the sea and drowned herself after being raped by a pirate. He writes, "The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving." In an interview about the poem, Thich speculated whether he might have become the pirate if he had grown up how the pirate grew up, if he had lived the pirate's life. I try to remember that we all carry the baggage of our circumstances, and we are all capable of both kindness and cruelty. I also think about the strategic and sustained program of disinformation that has been directed to Trump's base and the evangelical right. I think about how I didn't know about science and epidemiology and human sexuality and white supremacy until I was taught. Misinformed people may be dangerous, but not necessarily acting with malice. I want to stop them, outvote them, reinstate the fairness doctrine to educate them. But I don't want to be the person who wishes them death or dances on their graves. I try to remember the things I find offensive and disrespectful that my enemies do, and not do those things when I'm on the other side of the issue. Oh, and a big one. I try to moderate what I consume on social media. I've noticed over the past year or so that my Facebook feed is full of things like fail army videos, which show people slipping on ice, riding bicycles into poles, or falling off scaffolding on construction sites. I also find many videos of car accidents and instant karma and stories of petty revenge or getting even with bad bosses or bad neighbors. I think this is also intentional and strategic, and that we're being fed this steady diet of stuff to serve an agenda. These kinds of stories prime us for self-righteous anger, for celebrating when someone we disapprove of is hurt or put down or served a cold dish of revenge. They stoke the divisions between us, pander to our baser instincts, and desensitize us to other people's suffering. Don't watch that crap. Don't let it excite you and feed your lust for getting even. Don't be the person who cheers and dances as the corpse drags by. It is up to us to monitor our own hearts, to turn from thoughts of vengeance to thoughts of justice, from hatred to compassion, from rage to reflection. It's up to us to work on being who we want to be, especially in light of the forces in the world that want to drag us down. And one other thing I try to keep in mind. I'm not perfect, and I know it. When I find myself debasing another, cheering for the put down, rejoicing in the suffering, I try to show compassion to myself. Compassion is a practice. When I slip away from it, I simply turn back, sometimes again and again, because I know who I want to be. May it be so for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim, for those powerful words and ideas. We have a couple of community announcements. The first one is courtesy Jean Heinrich. If you are registered to vote in Fulton County, early voting is easy. And I can actually vouch for that because where we were doing our performance yesterday, the Metropolitan Library is one of the early voting places, and there was a constant stream of people going in, but it did look like everybody was having an easy time of it. Vote. And the World Peace Pyramid public viewing today. And the Guinness Book of World Records is a pending determination of the 22,140 golf balls that weigh a total of basically a ton.
Wow.
2,000 pounds. 2242 to be precise. And that will be today from 1 to 3 p.m. out here in the Woodland Sanctuary. Any other community announcements, Mary?
Well, I don't know if it's a community announcement, it's kind of a global announcement. Maybe some of you are aware that there is going to be a lunar eclipse this evening. There will be an amazing one, I understand. The moon will be really, really big, and it will be blood red. So I encourage everybody, to do it, be out there around 10:30 p.m. It's going to be from 10:30 to about 12:30 or 1. Cool.
Let's enjoy. Any other community announcements before we wrap up? All right, then